It's Wednesday, February 1st, and the time is 7 o'clock. Welcome to February, and I call this meeting to order. Please join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Item 1.04, approval of the agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Ewers, seconded by Ms. Trejo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item passes 5-0. Is there a 105? Is that a 105?
That's the approval of the modification.
Oh, okay, sorry.
This is right in the bottom.
Item 2.01, approval modification minutes for the January 25th governing board meeting. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Ms. Ewers, seconded by Ms. Trejo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item passes 5-0. Item 3.01, celebrate excellence. Dr. Driscoll.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. I have a few items I want to share for Celebrate Excellence. Aerial roller 6th and 7th grade PACE students have been working on a unique project to help bring their vision of future sustainability community to life. The students began city planners and created a city that they would want to live in. The students discussed what elements were important to them for creating a sustainable community. They considered things like safety, education, entertainment, and an inclusive atmosphere. Students worked by themselves or in groups of two and chose what they wanted to plan and build. They discussed a reasonable scale that they would use so that the city was proportional and uniform in size. The student exceeded Ms. Roller's expectation beyond belief and created a well-designed, unique city named Tiny Town. I was kind of jealous. I wanted to do that. When I heard about it, I was like, I didn't get the invite. I wanted to play. School Counselor Week. Across the nation, National School Counseling Week is celebrated on February 6th through February 10th to highlight the tremendous impact school counselors have in helping students achieve success in school and in life. From developing trust in an important student-to-counselor relationship to having a positive relationship with school staff and our students' family members, school counselors are an integral part of our schools' communities. Tempe Elementary is proud of our 25 school counselors, and we're very thankful for their important work they do each and every day. I want to say, didn't our counselors, or are they going to the state conference? Yeah, pretty awesome. And I want to say for the public, my person that helps me with pronouncing names is not here, so if I butcher anybody's name, she's a teacher at Rover, and she's not here tonight. Director of School Leadership, Dr. Nancy Uxa, Mosley Literacy Coach, Melissa Gonzalez, I think her husband's in the audience, and Mosley Principal, who I'm not going to say his last name, Bijou, had an opportunity to present about the continuous improvement that Geneva Epps Mosley Middle School has made over the last 2.5 years at the Arizona Department's ESSA conference in Tucson. The 3-day conference theme was The Power to Make Change. Participants included superintendents, directors, principals, instructional leaders from around the state, and I got a text during it. We had our spelling bee, so I couldn't go down there. And I want to say they had me pronouncing students' names in spelling bee, so I apologize to the families that are watching, and if I mispronounce your student's name, I struggle with pronunciation. I do. But they did a fabulous job. I had 3 superintendents that I know that were in there, and they said, hey, they did magic. And I was like, really? Dr. Uxa? So, but no, they did a really good job. So I couldn't pass up the opportunity. Sorry. Dr. Uxa did a wonderful job as well. Tempe Elementary School District kicked off our first ever TD3 Middle School Roadshow, bringing our 3 comprehensive middle school options to 5th graders. Connolly Middle School, Fees College Prep, and Geneva Epps Mosley students and staff visited their neighborhood elementary schools in an effort to drum up excitement for 5th graders getting ready to enter 6th grade. Students enjoyed musical performance, student-led presentations on electives offered, and more. This idea was brought to life thanks to the athletics coordinator, Gregory Howe, and fine arts coordinator, Courtney Darby. Thank you for helping us to continue our students' legacy at Tempe Elementary Schools. And that is it for my Celebrate Excellence for this week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Driscoll. Item 4.01, presentation of compensation study results.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Driscoll. If you recall last year, out of IBN, one of the tasks of the team was to look into salaries and wages, looking at doing a compensation study. And so I have tonight here Karen Smith from Heinfeld Meach, and she's going to share some of the findings from the compensation study.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for welcoming me this evening to the governing board meeting. I'm excited to share with you the results of this study. We've been working on it for several months now. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background. As mentioned, my name is Karen Smith. I actually used to be down the road at Kyrene Schools for about 12 years. So I've been in this area for quite some time. But I'm excited to share with you the results of this compensation study. So a little bit of background. So the district engaged our firm to conduct a compensation study on select positions. I'm going to talk about what some of those positions were. And we have done compensation studies around the state for various different school districts where we look at the market conditions and we look at the comparability of the entry, the midpoint, the actual, and the high point of various different positions. We also look at not just the wage, because we know that there's more that goes into compensation, which includes some of the working conditions, such as number of holidays, number of paid days off, benefit packages, things like that. So we look at a number of different areas. And we look at like-sized districts, but then we also know that in the comparison area, there's other factors to take into account, other school districts as well as other governmental entities in the area. So we look at various different areas as we look at the market conditions of the various different job positions. When looking at this, it's also important, and we included quite a bit of information if you were able to review the report, that talk about various different school funding issues. So we talk about the inflationary factor and the fact that it wasn't always there in our school district funding, particularly why the next item, Prop 123, came about to provide additional funding to our school districts. We also talk about the implications of Prop 206. Prop 206 was the proposition that drives our minimum wage in our state. So as you may know, minimum wage has significantly increased in the recent years. Prop 206 also requires the mandatory sick leave that we provide to our employees. So that has an implication on our funding. Capital funding reductions, granted right now we are back to fully funded in our capital formula. There were, as we all know, many years in which our capital funding was reduced, which basically kind of stole some of the funding we had for operations to address our capital needs. Other implications of our funding was the Governor Ducey's it was tagged as 20 by 20, but it was really 20 by 21, in which we received additional funding in our base support to provide increases to our certified staff. And the formula that was included in that did not address all of our certified positions outside of teachers, as well as classified and administrative positions. So how school districts managed that had an impact on our funding. Whether or not a school district has an M&O override can have an impact. Our maintenance and operation override is a voter-approved initiative that allows for school districts to exceed the statutory budget limit. So whether a school district has that or not, whether their voters have approved that, has an implication on our funding. And last but not least, desegregation funding. So all of these areas have an impact on the available resources that we have to dedicate to wages. So we put some of that in the report, more so to provide a basis. So for a lot of people who may not have that expertise in school funding, they have some of the background that kind of plays into the different challenges when it comes to compensation. Our study, what we looked at, we did not look at every single position in the school district. The district asked us to look at specific classified positions and administrative positions. And with that, we also did a high-level review of the benefits. As I mentioned, with the benefits, we wanted to look at specifically what the district cost was for providing health insurance to its employees, as well as what the employee cost is when they insure their family member, spouse, children, etc. because that is a marketability component of if your health insurance cost is higher than another neighboring district or another governmental entity, that might be a deterrent for people wanting to come to work for the school district. As I mentioned, when we looked at the positions, we didn't just look at just flat out salary schedules. We wanted to look at other components. We looked at work calendars. So if neighboring school districts provided for, in some cases, classified positions to be able to work more hours, more work days, that might be more competitive because the wages would then be higher over the year. So we wanted to look at the comparison of work calendars. We wanted to look at not just the salary schedule, but also actually where people are placed on the salary schedule. We wanted to look at the number, as I mentioned earlier, the number of paid days off, the number of sick days, vacation days, things like that. So all of those different components were developed into what we call a data request. So we sent that out to comparison entities, and I'll talk to you a little bit about who those comparison entities are in just a second here. So as I said, we look at when we're talking about the comparison entities, it's important to obviously look right around the area from a geographic perspective, but it's also important to look at other like-size school districts when we're talking about funding and different components to the funding model. So when we put this request out to various different entities, you can see the list here as far as who was actually able to provide us this information. So this is a request to our neighbors to say, please provide us your information. And there is a little bit of a perk because we do provide the raw data back to those school districts. So we know that it's a burden to request this. So we want to make sure that there is a little bit of a enticement to be able to gather this information. So Chandler Unified, Kyrene Elementary, Phoenix Elementary, Roosevelt Elementary, and Tempe Union were all school districts who provide us that data. We also were able to get data from the city of Chandler. And my note there about limited requests for positions, obviously with a city, you don't have as many positions that are direct connections to city positions. So we limited it to some of those accounting, HR, facility management types of positions that you would see in both a municipality as well as a school district. One note to keep in mind, as many of you who have been, I recognize a lot of names here, so many of you have been in school systems for quite some time. With every school district, you're going to have a little bit different organizational structure. So when we look at positions, we can't just call a school secretary the same across all school districts because job duties do look a bit different. So when we look at different aspects of this, it's also important to look at, well, is there a complete outlier in our comparison? Because if there's a complete outlier, likelihood is that that position has a different set of job duties as well. And it's possible to kind of narrow it down with certain positions to gather up those job descriptions and really look at the duties. Overall, we listed some of the key responsibilities and asked the other school districts to say, okay, you may not call it that position, but what position in your district has these general similar responsibilities? Other positions might be a little bit more closely aligned. There are certain positions, a bus driver is a bus driver, where that might be a little bit more of a direct alignment. The other component just keep in mind is this is information that's self-reported by other school districts. We did not get into their general ledger. We did not get into their payroll system to gather the data. We asked them to report that information back to us. So we just like to kind of point some of those different components out. So a couple of the highlights of the results that we found. So one of the first areas we looked at is work calendars. Something unique to school districts that you don't see in all other sectors is employees don't work year round. We know that being a school system. And some of our classified support personnel may not work all 12 months of the year. So it's important to look at, do other school districts have the ability for those individuals? And that could be a pro or that could be a deterrent of individuals wanting to work in those positions. So we looked at work calendars to identify which positions either had a plus or minus of 10% differential. And these are just a couple of the positions that stood out that had a differential of greater or less than 10% differential. So for example, if you have one school district that the position works 10 months a year and another school district that position works 11 months of the year, some employees might say, well, I want to work for that district that has 11 months of the year because I can earn more wages. versus some might say, well, I want to work my child's school schedule, so I want to be on that school-based schedule. So with each of these, it's important to kind of look at who is your pool in which you're recruiting from as well. As far as the wages, we looked at about 80 different classified positions. They were grouped based off of the different functional areas of the school district. And we found that in almost 30, so of 29 of the positions, they were at least 10% less of the actual hourly rate than being paid in those comparison entities. So that's a pretty high number when you look at the number of positions that were less than the comparisons. And a handful, literally 5, were 10% more than the actual averages of the comparison districts. And in the report, the admin team here at the district does have the actual specific positions, so then they can delve a little bit further into those positions to see what are some of the characteristics and the components of those different classified support personnel positions. On the administrative side, we looked at about 33 different positions that were included in the analysis. Of those, 9 of the administrative salaries were 10% or more below the comparisons for, again, the actual average salaries that are being earned, and 3 of those positions were above 10% or more of the average salaries. And then, as I mentioned, we also looked at the benefits. So you can see here, I realize some of those numbers are a little smaller on the screen here. In the report, we really focused in on not just the cost of the district, because obviously that does have a financial implication on how much you have available for wages, but also from a recruitment perspective, if there's an employee who wants to cover their family or their child or their spouse, that can be a recruitment tool as well if your cost for family coverage, spousal coverage, child coverage is less than some of your comparisons. So I know that when we talked about this was something that was very important to the district to look at what some of those differentials were and if it is actually more expensive for the district or if it is less expensive. So as you see the negative numbers up there, that means that it's less expensive for the coverage here at Tempe Elementary compared to those comparison entities. If it's a positive number, you'll see that it's more expensive to provide that additional coverage for family members and spouses and children on the plan. So with that, that's just a high-level overview. I know that the report, there's a lot of numbers in there and a lot of information that's included. I'll open it up to any questions that I can answer about our methodology, our process, our approach to this, and then possibly defer if there's any implementation questions to the admin team.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I see lights coming on already. Mr. Lemon.
Thank you, Madam President. Great presentation. I'd like to look at those charts that I can't see.
Yeah, I realize some of those numbers are a little small.
Yeah, but I think it's very interesting, that we look at that and looking at did you also look at the ambient age of the classified and certified employees?
We did not look at age information. We looked at more of just the straight out wage information. So we did not look at years of experience or how many years of experience people are coming in with. When we look at certified, because usually on your certified schedules, you do tend to see years of experience that are credited, because in some cases with our teacher experience index that our funding formula includes, that's a driver for funding. So we typically do look at, when we're looking at the certified positions, how many years of experience are credited upon hire, but that wasn't something that we pulled into this particular group because we weren't specifically focusing on the certified staff.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking forward to the printed copy or an online copy.
You actually probably want an online version so you can zoom in on that.
Thank you.
Ms. Trejo.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to thank you. This very comprehensive. You weren't just averaging salaries across the board, and I think that really helps. And I'm curious to dive into the numbers a bit more as well, and to see what Mr. McGinney's up to with these results. I know when we publicly report the data, it just shows a flat average for most of the time, and so people see like, oh, why is Tempe Elementary teachers less than X district, or not factoring in? Well, we have less maybe calendar years, or but we also have better benefits, and I think that definitely helps tell a bigger picture. So thank you for everyone who helped contribute. And I know that there's different salary studies out there. Was there a reason why other districts didn't partake, or?
Honestly, we asked a few other districts, and it was purely pressure of time, what districts had as far as available resources to pull this together. As you know, across the state, there's a staffing issue within school districts. So when you have vacancies, it's hard to prioritize some of these voluntary requests versus getting people hired, getting people screened to be able to be in the classroom. So honestly, some of the districts that we asked who weren't able to provide as much as we asked, we're like, okay, we'll delay it, we'll wait, we'll try to push this out as much as possible. And it just came down to they didn't have the resources to be able to pull it together for us.
Thank you. And Mr. McGee, this might be for you later as well to consider, but did you notice a possible correlation between those that we had a bit under the average with some vacancies?
Right now, I could probably make some assumptions to it, but until we really dive in there and get into the granular level of it, there's a lot of information that we're gonna have to go through. And I can talk to you guys about what our next steps are as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trejo. Ms. Ewers?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I do have a question on the interpretation of the other districts when they were answering the questions. Did you feel like it was pretty consistent and that because I know when you were talking at one point, I thought, well, does she sit down with them and say, are you interpreting this job and this job description the same as I'm interpreting this job and job description? So did you feel pretty confident that the answers that were coming back were pretty like-kind quality?
For the most part, yes. There are some, and I actually pointed that out in the raw data to the admin team to point out that if this one, so let's just say, for example, you have an average hourly rate of $20 an hour versus 12 or whatever the current minimum wage, $13.85.
yeah.
If there's that strong of a differential, that's like, okay, for that particular district, we might need to exclude that from the averages or ask for that specific job description so we can look exactly, are those aligned duties? For the most part, I will say that in education and with our experience with various different positions, we tend to kind of weed through some of that, and we can identify based off of some of the key responsibilities to try to match them up as much as possible. But I'll tell you, in my experience working in schools for 25 years, every school district has slightly different job descriptions. So you're not going to have an exact shade of apples next to each other, but you'll at least have the same class of positions together.
Okay, thank you. And I can't say how timely this is. There's another district in the state that signed a bill for themselves, or what do we call them? Do we call them bills? Resolutions, yeah. That their starting salary is going to be a lot higher than ours. So I'm sure this question is going to be coming our way very, very soon because that's hitting the news as of yesterday and today.
Yes,
So-
I saw it myself.
So, yeah, we're all aware, and competition is everything right now. So what you're saying is I know that, Mr. McGinney, you're going to dig into this. I feel it, and I if you don't, I'm going to come after you. So the main thing is that we have some positions that we really need to become more competitive on.
Yes, yeah, I would say definitely, and we didn't look at certified. We were not tasked to look at certified because oftentimes certified is a little bit easier to get your hands wrapped around. Yeah. It's when you have 80 different classified positions. It is harder to align those positions. So I feel like the district did look at its resources accurately as far as what to really focus in on. So I think that you definitely we saw almost 30 positions are under the actual average, and that's important to look at from a retention perspective. Right. It's not just what somebody can get hired in at, but it's that retention of your good staff now. So if there are opportunities in neighboring districts or neighboring municipalities to jump over and be able to make more, that's important for the district to have that data.
And I know this is very comprehensive raw data, but did we have any of our employees or any of the groups look over and say, oh, yeah, I do feel that that's correct? Or are we pretty confident that the data that we have, we don't need to make sure that everyone's feeling the same way?
That's a good question. So obviously, part of the IBM process is hearing the voice of all of our staff, and so we've heard the narratives of which employee groups are having concerns about being below market value, and so obviously the result of those conversations yielded the compensation study. So we have a really good idea of which employee groups we desperately have to address, and we'll make some of those tough decisions through this.
And the hard part is, there's only so many resources to go around, so it's how to prioritize. So as you kind of look at those differentials, in any school district that I've ever worked with, it would be great if we had a money tree to be able to address it all. So it's kind of like, okay, which are our hardest to fill? Which are our most critical positions? And how do we break this into stages? Because we won't be able to address it all at once. We have other factors outside of our control. Arizona State retirement's going up next year. Health insurance continues to be a challenge. Minimum wage, we know that minimum wage is going to continue to adjust outside of our control. So when we have to look at that in connection with also staying marketable, how do we prioritize those resources?
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Ms. Ewers. All right, so I have a couple of questions for Mr. McGinty. First question would be, you've gone through the HR internal process audit. You've done the compensation study and IBN process. Are you feeling thoroughly analyzed at this point?
Well, Madam President, first of all, I don't want anybody coming after me, so I'm going to address it and say yes. We've got our work cut out for us. I think that again, kind of going back to it, we started this conversation last year, and so we've had a good period of time to start saying, okay, we know that these are the hard to fill positions. We know these are some of the categories that we have to address. The tough conversations are going to come with exactly what Karen is saying is, okay, the pot hasn't grown any larger, but we have to make some tough decisions. So we're ready for that work. But when we have recommendations, obviously we will run that through IBN. We'll run it to Dr. Driscoll and ultimately to you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My last question would be for you, Mr. McGinty. You said we could ask you about the next steps of implementation. What are
Right.
those steps?
Yep, so obviously Karen shared that, all that information with us. Mr. Thompson and I have already started the process of kind of going through and looking at some of those categories that she shared of where we're above, where we're below. A couple of them jumped off the page. There were a few, and I forget what percentage we kind of looked at, it was like 24%.
We said some that are like 25% up, upwards that are differential. It's like, okay, there's gotta be an outlier in there. Did a school district classify that position differently? One of the tables you'll see in the study, we also looked at job duties are obviously different if somebody is classified as non-exempt versus exempt. So if in one school district that is an exempt position, and here in Tempe that's a non-exempt, that right away tells us the job duties are different. So we need to then boil that down to say, okay, so are we really comparing like positions, or do we need to strip out the school districts that said that that was an exempt position and then just look at the districts that say that that was a non-exempt position? So with the raw data that the district now has access to, they can kind of go through like another iteration of that and say, okay, so maybe City of Chandler isn't a good comparison because of the nature of city work for that type of a position. So let's take that one out, and now let's look at what the averages are. And if one school district identifies different job duties, maybe we need to take that one out of the average and now see where we are. So we're able to look at that. Additionally, with some positions, I would say the interpreter translator might be a good example, where maybe that's a contracted position in one district and it's a staffed position in another position, or excuse me, in another district. So being able to identify those roughly 30 positions and then drill down into those positions, I think is going to help the district isolate, okay, from those, then where's our priority in those specific positions?
And Madam President, I would say, obviously, we'll go through all of that data, but the biggest part then becomes what is our budget implications? What is, if we could say, sure, absolutely, we need to pay this group, we need to pay this group, we need to pay this group, but how are we going to do that? What's the timeline going to be? So those are our next steps.
Okay, and I have actually one other question. Sure. So when we start talking about, the pot not getting any bigger, we obviously have to make priorities. And is it through the IBN process that those priorities are set? Because everybody thinks that their job is a priority. So is the IBN that determines that?
Your answer is yes and yes, because everybody's job is a priority. Right. And so that's why we have those, a lot of thoughtful, considerate conversation happens in IBN. And we tell people all the time, and I think I shared with you last time, is that we're very proud of the fact that we can say every employee group in this district has a voice. It's through the IBN survey, it's through the conversations that we have. One of the other things that we committed to last year was to say, if we have an employee group that we need to hear from further beyond just the data in the compensation studies, that we would bring them into the process. And so we've already kind of started that conversation. We've calendared out our first, I think, 2 or 3 IBN meetings, so everything's kind of already in motion.
Excellent, thank you so much, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Item 5.01, open call to the public. We have no blue cards, so we're going to skip that and head to 6.01, approval of consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Trejo, seconded by Ms. Ewers. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Item passes 5-0. Mr. McGinney, back to you.
All right, thank you, Madam President. I'm very excited to share some information this evening. As you know, for the last few months, we've been without a nutrition services director until tonight. So, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Driscoll, I'd like to highlight an individual that you approved on the personnel summary this evening. Tonight, you approved Ms. Bethany Hultstrand to the position of Director of Nutrition Services, and I'd like to share a little bit about her background. Bethany holds a bachelor's degree in nutrition and dietetics from Fontbonne University, a bachelor's degree in English and history from the University of Missouri. I'll wait for Mr. Thompson.
Go Tigers.
He's been waiting all week to say that. Bethany also brings with her a variety of experiences in nutrition and the food services industry, serving in leadership roles for the Maricopa County Department of Public Health, Levine Elementary School District, and most recently as the dietitian for Aramark in the Chandler Unified School District. Those who know Bethany have shared that she is an amazing team player, dependable, and has a very welcoming personality. She leads by example and is easily relatable to her colleagues. Her knowledge and dedication to health make those around her feel confident and motivated to work alongside of her. Bethany is passionate about giving students access to healthier options and providing our employees with the support they need to succeed. We are confident that she will be an asset to TD3. Welcome and congratulations to Bethany.
Am I pushing it? Oh, I thought I had to hold it, excuse me. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, and Dr. Driscoll. As Mr. McGinney had mentioned, my name is Bethany Hultstrand, and I have been selected to be the new food service director here at Tempe Elementary School District. I must assure you, I can assure you that these past couple weeks have been some of the most exciting weeks of my life, and I'm incredibly humbled and grateful to be given this opportunity. And I just cannot wait to share my love and passion for food and nutrition with the students here in the Tempe community. Thank you very much.
Do you want to introduce your guest?
This is my life partner. We're not married yet, but we've been together for over a decade. This is Mark.
Thank you, Mark. And you get extra credit just for remembering to push the button, so you'll figure out to let go later on. Welcome to Tempe Elementary. Also approved on the agenda were 3 donations. We have a $1,006 from Harkins. Harkins is consistently on this list, along with help snacks, by the way, for McKinney-Vento, $4,400 from them for Holdeman, Mosley, and Scales. And then we also had the approval for Connolly, Fees, Mosley, and Shamley Health Offices to receive 100 hygiene bags from Spread to Love organization valued at over $1,000. So thank you, as always, to those community partners. Item 7.01, second review and adoption of proposed changes to governing board policy JFABDA, admission of students in foster care. Were there any board member comments or suggested edits or comments?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the governing board policy JFABDA, admission of students in foster care as recommended.
And a second?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Trejo, seconded by Mr. Lemon. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item passes 5-0. Item 8.01, board members' points of information. we have Ms. Trejo.
Thank you, Madam President. Officially welcome to our district. We actually were just at Chandler on Monday. It was now looking. I'm glad we did this after, because otherwise we would have felt a bit awkward. So welcome to the TD3 family. We had the privilege of attending the East Valley Consortium dinner with Mr. Miller, Dr. Driscoll, and Ms. Ewers. So every, I don't know, maybe once or twice a semester, one of the East Valley districts hosts in different sites, and the topic of this, one of the topics was actually Aramark. So yeah, another, good moment that we waited till after. So and then I feel like there was a lot that happened. But I do want to mention an important thing that hopefully we'll bring up in the next board meeting. Today we talked about budget and contracts and salaries and whatnot. A lot of it, I'm assuming, is very contingent on aggregate expenditure limit and the governor and legislature's budget. As some of you may or may not remember, a year ago we had a very, several month conversation on the aggregate expenditure limit, which is, the legislature needs to approve so we can basically spend the money that they already allocated to all the districts. And so that's kind of, right now we're again in kind of a limbo phase. And if the legislature doesn't take any action by March 1st, districts across Arizona, all districts stand to lose up to 16, 17% of their funding, which can be very catastrophic. So, hopefully we'll get an update on where the movement is there and what that impact would look like among our own district.
Thank you, Ms. Trejo. Ms. Ewers? Oh, Eric, actually. Mr. Miller, please push that button.
Thank you, Madam President. I suppose just to that point on the AEL, out of the House Education Committee, they passed HCR 2001, which is basically exempting us from the AEL limit for this fiscal year. So step one has been taken care of, and so, hoping and praying that things go forward. And also, I guess, on a more silly note, wanted to mention I'll be doing the 5K thing. I signed up, so I'll be doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Lemon?
Thank you, Madam President. It looks like a tough budget year. I mean, there's money there, but they don't want us to spend it. And so, we need to be good stewards of that, and then also look to the future, not the past. And I think that's where we need to go. And particularly, I was interested in the health benefits that we provide. And I've heard comment over the years that for our dependents, it was kind of expensive. And so that's, Ms. Ewers, when the committee meets again, that would be very helpful to really take a long look at that, because it makes a difference with people with families, that they'll take less money if they can get a good deal for the rest of their kids. And particularly for people just entering and they don't have a lot of dependents, or their dependents have other opportunities. But I think it's important from that standpoint. So I'm waiting for their report and take a look at it and burrow into it a bit. I did have I'm sorry I couldn't attend the East Valley Consortium. I have 2 retired teachers staying with me. Today we went to the MIM Museum, Musical Instrument Museum, with some students from Meyer. We met them up there, and it was very interesting. And I would encourage everybody that has kids or out-of-town visitors to go look at it, because it's a fantastic museum with instruments from all over the world, and you can hear the music, and you could spend hours doing it. And the little ones probably are gone after about 2 hours, but it was a good day. So thank you, Ms. Franklin, for cueing me in, and also the folks at Meyer. And so they're great people at Meyer, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemon. Ms. Ewers?
Thank you, Madam President. I had the honor of being a judge at the Spelling Bee last Thursday, and I have to say I'm highly impressed. As the first round and the second round started, I was like, okay, this is nothing for these kids. And I'm like having to look at the dictionary, make sure I had it right. And as it became more and more competitive, I was just so elated to see how well our children were performing. And it's a very nerve-wracking thing. So all those that competed, no matter if you won or what place you got, you need to be very proud of yourself, because that's something that not everyone does or has ever done. So at your young, ripe age, you are already ahead of the game on experiencing something that others just wouldn't even put themselves in the position of doing. We talked about the East Valley dinner on Monday night. It was great. It was interesting to talk about food services. The other thing is that now more than ever, if you love your public schools, like your public schools, need your public schools, make sure that everyone around you knows it. February 3rd, March 3rd, February 3rd, March 3rd, every employee who's listening to this, we are having the breast cancer screenings at Bustos from 12 to 4 and at Sanchez from 7 to 5. There is an expense to the district to offer these, but we feel it's an extremely important thing to offer. We would love to have it at every single school. We'd love to have it more convenient for every single person just to be able to walk next door. But I, coming from the corporate world, can tell you that this is a lot more convenient than going to a Simon Med, sitting in the wait room for an hour and a half after they tell you that they can't find your reservation, and then going in, and then sometimes I'm telling you have to come back the next day. We all know this. Every single woman that's in this room that's ever had a mammogram has gone through issues getting there, how long it's taken, and you pretty much need to take the day off to do this process. We're trying to make that where you don't. So please, February 3rd, March 3rd, it's very important. We want you all, as a person who's surrounded by breast cancer survivors. I'm grateful that we detected it at the levels that we did, because they're all still with me. So please be aware of those days. And then the wellness exams. If you take a wellness exam, which is paid for through all between January 1 to 12/31, you get entered into a contest for a $150 wellness prize. There's going to be 20 people that are going to be drawn. So make sure, one, it's worth it to see and check your health and see if there's something that we need to. And some people have come back to me and said, are you sure you want them to check their health? What if there's something wrong and it's going to be more expensive? That is not the way to look at your health, people. Look at it now, and let's prevent it and get you healthy. The healthier you are in your workplace and in the classroom, the healthier it is for our kids. So your health is just as important as my health to me. Love your 5K run. I'll see you there. I will not be running. Eric probably will be. I'm thinking the Erics might be running. I'll just wave to you and give you a high five as you go by. I was honored to listen to Henry Winkler and Marley Matlin speak last night. And Henry Winkler is a now, I mean, he's known as the Fonz for all of us from Happy Days. So there's some people in the room that might be like, what the heck is Happy Days? But he is also a children's writer. And he's been traveling the world with his children's books, and he absolutely loves it. And his information that he was giving to parents and to community members, his number one thing he ask all of us, is to listen to your children. Listen to your children. When there's all this noise, there's all this stuff that's going on, there's a lot of kids, and he says that because he suffered from dyslexia and didn't know it until he was 31 years old. And he kept failing and failing and failing and failing. He got a D, he finally got to graduate. And so he struggled, and they called him a dumb kid. And once he knew what was happening, it just opened the gates to his entire life, but no one was listening to him. And when he was saying, I'm not understanding this, or I'm not reading this. So he just asked us all, so I'm going to send that on, and maybe I get to meet him one day and say that I did, that just listen to your children. And again, talk to your kids about fentanyl. Some of you may have seen this week that a 3-year-old has now passed away. So it's everywhere. It's on everything. So the one thing that we can do is just tell our kids, don't accept any candy, don't accept any food. And if you have a headache or you need something to make you feel better or you're sick, go to our nurse's office. So that's what I'm so proud of public schools. We have our nurses. We have resources for them. Please encourage them to keep themselves safe and not accept anything from anybody else. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sears. I just have a couple things. I know we always worry about state funding, but it came out today, or excuse me, earlier this week, that while many states in the United States are getting an increase in title funding, Arizona can expect to have a reduction of at least $14 million. We have all but 4 of our schools who are title schools, so that's going to impact our budget as well. And then, since I'm speaking about title, and she's sitting here, we have Ms. Trish Garrity, who's in the audience, and she has been a phenomenal teacher of mine, teaching me all things title, and I'm grateful for her stewardship and her leadership with the title funds and making sure it's directed towards student outcomes and improving student lives. Once again, attended the TD3 sports soccer matches on Saturday because I was required to as a mother. And I have to say that I've just been so thrilled. I spoke of it last time. I'm going to say it one more time. I'm not one to really repeat things, but this one, I looked a little bit differently at the audience that was there. Like, what do we call those people? Spectators. Sorry, sports are not my thing. And so they have like crock pots out there. They're serving food. They have posters. They have radios that they're bringing out to play championship songs for the winners. I mean, we've got like finger tunnels going on. It's all in. Parents are super excited about it. So I know y'all are busy, but if anybody wants to swing by, it is fun out there. And like, even me who's like, sports, like super fun. I don't mind going. I don't hate it. Let's put it that way. And my husband will be at the 5K. I'll let him know he'll have some competition since the other Eric's bowing out, so. All right. Item 9.01, announcements and upcoming events. There will be an agenda committee meeting on Wednesday, February 8th at 11:30 a.m. There will be a regularly scheduled governing board meeting on Wednesday, February 15th at 7 p.m. here in the Karen Arredondo Governing Board Room. The Tempe Elementary Love Your Heart 5K, sponsored by TEEA, will be held on Saturday, February 18th at 8 a.m. at Kiwanis Park. President's Day is Monday, February 20th. All district offices and schools will be closed, and the ASBA Second Annual Advocacy Day is Monday, February 20th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So it's the day, but it's only part of the day? That doesn't make sense. At the Arizona Capitol Historic Senate Chamber at 1700 West Washington Street, excuse me. And item 10.01, meeting adjournment. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Oh, she stole the thunder.
Second.
There we go. Moved by Ms. Sears, seconded by Mr. Miller. All in favor? Aye. Meeting's adjourned.